I'm going to bring in a familiar face now. Your host of CBC's Power and Politics, David Cochrane, has interrupted his vacation for this high-stakes moment.
Hey.
Thank you very much, David.
Oh, it's good to be here. I mean, we're in a critical hours, right?
Yeah,
in the Canada-U.S. relationship, not just economically, not just trade, but politically, and just in sort of how the two countries feel about each other. So as Kate laid out, I mean, they're pretty high stakes right now. And we could be really into the final hours of what is essentially free trade with the United States. Because wherever this lands, Karina, it seems utterly clear there's going to be some baseline level of tariff on a lot of the key industries in this country. Except this time, if these negotiations succeed, they're going to be agreed to tariffs, not imposed tariffs. Now, that may be a distinction without a difference, given the nature of the U.S. administration that Mark Carney and his people are up against. But you're going to end up with a trade arrangement that is worse than the trade arrangement we've had for decades, and something that would have been negotiated that includes concessions, big asks and big requests of the premiers, and it is going to change that relationship on a permanent basis, and we haven't even gotten to CUSMA.
And we don't even know all the details yet of this deal if it comes to pass. Now, you mentioned that this is a lot for people to swallow, including the premiers. What do we know about where the premiers are and how the Prime Minister is going to sell it to them?
Well, there's a couple of things that I'm picking up throughout the week. There is a growing unease out there, just with the direction of where this is going. And I'll start with what we know about where the premiers are on this. Wednesday, when Mark Carney and his team briefed the First Ministers, not a tremendous amount of detail was shared. They were told, for example, supply management is going to remain intact, but then they were asked specific questions. They kind of didn't offer those specifics. But the big request that we know about this was to put American booze back on the shelves once there is a deal as a condition of getting the deal. So one of the people at the center of that has obviously been Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who was the chair of the Council of the Federation when all of this started, has been a frequent visitor on U.S. cable networks, and at the vanguard of the dollar for dollar, hit them back, fight, 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 go to the mattresses approach to the Canada-U.S. relationship. Well, the LCBO has been his trump card in all of this because it's the biggest bulk buyer of alcohol in the world. And essentially what's been put on the table for the Premier of Ontario to consider is putting American booze back on the shelves, beginning to buy U.S. liquor products again, in return for an agreement that imposes a baseline of tariffs on the auto sector and on the steel sector, which are massive industrial anchors of the Ontario economy, right? So this is not the sort of outcome Doug Ford has been advocating for, has been hoping for. Putting the booze back, Doug Ford famously doesn't drink. This could drive him to drink, having to accept a deal like this. And you're also hearing an unease throughout some of the sectoral players, the advisory people that are brought in on just where this is going. And I watched an interview with Flavio Volpe with our colleague Natasha Fata earlier on CBC News Network, and he was making it very plain that he wants the Ontario Premier to fight for the best possible deal for the auto sector, and that if Mark Carney and his team decide they have to accept something that damages these industries to try to stabilize things and move on to the larger CUSMA conversation, that the government's got to get out there and explain it. They've had a lot of support and people backing them from the sectors, putting faith in the negotiating team, knowing what they're up against and knowing the challenges of this administration. But now that you're getting to the point where at least the contours are becoming clear, it's going to be tough for a lot of these industries. Like you look at auto, the 15% headline number that we hear, that can be reduced to an effective rate of about 7.5% of a tariff if the content of the car is about 50%. There's a push to have Canadian-made parts, increase, so it would reduce it even further. But as Flavio Volpe said today, like the profit margins are like 6%.
Yeah.
So you put a tariff of 7.5%.
There's a lot of bitter pills to be swallowed.
Right. You run into this sort of a problem. So there is this growing unease because these would be tariffs that would have been negotiated and accepted rather than imposed. And that's going to be a much harder sell given the dynamic that we've seen in the country over the past year or so.
So where do things go from here?
Well, it depends on what happens between now and midnight, right? I mean, Doug Ford did express, I'm told, his discomfort with the direction of this in the meeting, but said, look, I'm on Team Canada, I will play ball. We'll see where the final numbers land, right? Where that all goes by midnight tonight. Because if there is a deal, then it is that explanation and sales job and reasoning that needs to come from the federal government. If there isn't a deal, what does Donald Trump do? right? Like, does it escalate even further? You can't fight dollar for dollar with the United States because their economy is 10 times the size of Canada, even with all of their troubles. And if it extends, then this limbo period just keeps going. But the overarching goal for the government of Canada is to save CUSMA. As bad as it is for these sectors, the Canadian economy has largely been okay because of the maintaining of the CUSMA exemptions for the vast majority of the Canadian economy. Getting past these sectoral issues is the only path to a proper conversation about CUSMA. That's the prize, but what do you have to pay to get to that? And is that politically acceptable to the Canadian people? And that's going to be a tough test for the government.
Well, thanks for coming in for this.
We'll be back with the Power Panel.
I was just about to say, Power and Politics host David Cochrane, and he will be back on the Power Panel shortly. Negotiations are trickling into the final hours before U.S. President Trump's tariffs deadline of 12:01 a.m. August 22nd. We just heard from him on his way to South Carolina. Have a listen.
On Canada, have you come to a deal there?
Pretty much, I think so. We'll see. I've dealt with the Prime Minister, have a good relationship. And yeah, we have to take care of our farmers. The farmers are very important to me. And the deal with Canada is moving along, and we should be able to have a deal with Canada. We're also starting on a new deal with Mexico. A much better deal for the United States. I only make good deals. Much better deal for the United States, both with Canada and Mexico. Thank you very much.
Here to help shed some light on a still elusive trade deal is Ralph Goodale. He's a member of the Advisory Committee on Canada-U.S. Economic Relations and former High Commissioner to the UK. Thanks, Mr. Goodale, for coming in again. You're on the Advisory Committee. Has the committee received any information about the status of the talks?
There have been no further meetings or briefings in the last short while. All of us are in touch with various members of the government and receiving a bit of information. But
and you want to share with us?
Well, it's essentially the same that you've been sharing with your listeners. We're into the final hours, and quite frankly, there's nothing unusual about this. There's nothing peculiar about the way this is unfolding. You're dealing with a trading relationship between Canada and the United States that's worth about $1.3 trillion annually. So it's big and it's complex. It takes a lot of work. And person for person, the Canadian negotiating team is as strong as it gets anywhere in the world. And they are working through the meticulous detail of all of the complexities to make sure that at the end of the day, there's a deal that works for Canada, that's in Canada's interests. And if it's not there, then they will have the courage to say no.
Now, in these final hours leading up to this midnight deadline, how much real bargaining power does Canada have left?
Oh, I think quite a bit. When you get down to the fine points, they tend to, 1 point on one side lines up against 1 point on the other side. So you're not looking at the whole spectrum, but just certain dimensions of it. So naturally, as the scope of disagreement narrows, the points that you can refer to or use on both sides narrows as well. From Canada's perspective, we have those three fundamental objectives. Number one, avoid the 50% extra tariff burden that would be imposed if there is no deal. Secondly, reduce the tariff burden that already exists as much as it is possible to do that, given the predilections of the current U.S. administration, and then thirdly, for the long term, get that path forward to preserve and to strengthen the CUSMA, the Canada-U.S. Mexico agreement, because that is the avenue that ultimately provides us with the best market access in the world to the world's largest market. We went into these negotiations with the best trading arrangement in the world vis-a-vis the United States. And the objective is to make sure that as these negotiations conclude, we have preserved that position of having the best access in the world.
In terms of point one, staving off these 50% tariffs, obviously that's what really got us moving towards all these deadlines and these negotiations. Is it fair to say that with that threat, Donald Trump called Canada's bluff?
Well, Canada has been ready for these discussions for the better part of a year. Remember that it was the United States that walked away from the discussions last October, I guess it was, not Canada. And all through this period, we have done our homework. We have had proposals. We're putting them on the table, inviting the Americans to have discussions with us. That didn't happen before the CUSMA review date came and went on the 1st of July. So we fully expected there would be some other shoe to fall after that review date came by. And then by the middle of July, the United States indicated they were ready to have, finally, ready to have a serious conversation. An odd way to extend an invitation to the negotiating table by threatening 50% tariffs, but that's the modus operandi of that present government. So they presumably thought they were giving themselves some leverage, putting a time frame around it. We have meticulously worked through all of this period, putting Canada's best case forward, and it is going down to overtime. We're in overtime already. We'll see where we get by midnight tonight. But Canadians can be absolutely confident that no stone has been left unturned by the Canadian team, and the very strongest arguments have been put forward. The team will assess, ultimately the Prime Minister will assess at the end of the day whether what's there is good enough. Does it meet our objectives? Does it avoid the 50% tariffs? Does it bring down the other tariffs sufficiently well? Does it give us the path forward on CUSMA?
Mr. Goodale,
if those things are achieved, then there may be a deal.
In terms of that decision, yesterday, Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew actually suggested that Canada should call Trump's bluff when it comes to calling bluffs. Is that even possible?
The scope for decision making on Canada's part is indeed wide open, and as the team looks at the details of what's being offered on both sides and how the balance works out, is it fair? Does it meet Canada's objectives? Is it workable for the way forward? How does it compare to the rest of the world? How does it compare to the circumstances if there's not a deal? So you look at all of that, you weigh it all very carefully, and at the end of the day, if it doesn't measure up, if it doesn't give Canada the things that we believe are essential in terms of our objectives, then yes, Canada can walk away. We are a sovereign nation, and we can make that decision.
If we end up with a deal that does have permanent 25% sectoral tariffs that, yes, are less than what we're facing now, but nevertheless still quite punishing for some industries, how can the government call that a win?
Well, you compare it to two things. What are the circumstances that would exist if there was no negotiation or no agreement? What are the consequences for the Canadian economy in the absence of agreement? So you weigh that very, very carefully. As David Cochrane was saying earlier in the day, you have to consider the things that are strategic versus the things that are merely cathartic. The catharsis may make you feel better for a little while, but the best strategic decision will actually get you results that support the Canadian economy. There may well need to be decisions about industrial policy questions in Canada that would be needed to go forward to support certain sectors of the Canadian economy. And the fundamental point that the Prime Minister has always made and I think this is universally agreed, we need to build out the Canadian economy so ultimately we are less dependent on the Americans than we have been. All of that takes time, of course, but it's an objective that remains number one for Canada. Reduce that vulnerability, and in the meantime, while you're having to live with that vulnerability, make sure you've insulated yourself from it as much as you possibly can.
Have to leave it there. Thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you.
That's Ralph Goodale, who is a member of the Canada-U.S. Economic Advisory Committee and former High Commissioner to the UK.